It's been a few weeks since Prey was released, and it's quickly become one of my favorite games of the year, at least on the PC. Okay, so things aren't too bad on the Xbox One, but if you're a PlayStation 4 owner trying to enjoy Prey, well, there have been a few roadblocks to say the least. The game launched with some serious input latency issues, lengthy loading times, and no support for PlayStation 4 Pro, despite having the label right in the box. Now with the release of version 1.04, some of these complaints have been addressed. But like an episode of Black Mirror, perhaps things aren't quite what they should be. First off, yes, PlayStation 4 Pro has been added to the game at last, with real tangible improvements over the base experience. The resolution remains 1080p disappointingly, but the visuals have been enhanced in a number of key areas. For one thing, screen space reflections, which were previously exclusive to the PC version, are now available on the Pro. And they look great, bringing extra depth to the world that was lacking in the original console release. Shadow resolution has been improved as well for dynamic shadows, though unfortunately in some situations we still see shadows pop into view as we approach them. Anisotropic filtering has been increased to a full 16x as well, enabling sharper texture detail at oblique angles. The extra memory available on the system has also been used to eliminate the occasional texture popping that you get on the standard system. This flickering sign continues to show a low resolution texture seconds after already seeing it on a standard PS4. This is fixed on the Pro. Dynamic lights are now visible even further into the distance on the Pro. You can see the spotlight on the wall here if you look back into the room behind the blinds. It's a subtle effect, but when you're walking around the station, you won't see lights pop into view on the Pro. And this comes along with various other smaller improvements that have been added to the mix. It doesn't fundamentally change the look of the game, mind you, but the overall presentation is certainly more refined and looks much closer to the PC version running at 1080p. It would have been nice to see support for a higher resolution, such as 1440p as we saw in Dishonored 2, but still, it's great to see the game improved at last. Unfortunately, a new problem has been introduced across all PlayStation platforms, a problem which first appeared in version 1.02. To put it simply, yes, input latency has been fixed. The game is much more responsive now, but in an attempt to solve the issue, Arcane has introduced another problem altogether. Since version 1.02, continuing all the way up to 1.04, Prey is now a juddery mess in motion. It's fair to say that we regularly report on bad frame pacing in games, but nothing could prepare us for the severity of the issue in Prey. This is, without a doubt, the worst instance of bad frame pacing we've encountered to date. The game almost appears to be sputtering along as if your system is overheating and failing before your eyes. It simply doesn't look good, and it does actually kind of hamper the fun. And in addition to that, as the game uses an adaptive VSync solution, there is now a plethora of torn frames present in each and every scene along the top portion of the image. Taken as a whole then, Prey simply no longer feels smooth to play on PlayStation 4. Clearly the fix for input latency is to blame for this problem, and whichever settings have been adjusted to fix that have resulted in this performance problem instead. The results just aren't very good. And it's a shame really, as choosing between input latency or a visibly poor frame rate is not really a choice we'd like to make. And it's not the first time something like this has happened. Rise of the Tomb Raider on PlayStation 4 launched with noticeable input lag as well, but a patch was rolled out later on which greatly improved the situation, while also introducing support for PS4 Pro. Following that, yet another patch was released which further improved input latency, while introducing noticeable frame pacing errors in the process. Nixxes then basically restored the functionality from the patch prior to that, which provided a nice balance for a reasonably responsive game with a smooth frame rate. Perhaps Arcane could achieve the same results here. It might require some fine-tuning, but it would benefit everyone. Unfortunately, that's not all. Another interesting bug cropped up during our comparisons, and it took a little bit of time to figure out just what was going on. Basically, during the comparison, we noticed that the PS4 version had a wider field of view, and couldn't figure out why that was since there's no option to change this. Then it hit me. Check out this scene. The text along the side here, perfectly legible, right? Well, if we pop into the inventory, then back out of it, the text is no longer visible, as the FOV has been reduced. If you compare the two, it's clear that the FOV is reduced after entering the inventory. So basically, once you open your inventory on any map, you're going to be stuck with a reduced FOV until you load the next map, and then it occurs again once you open up the inventory. This occurs on PS4, PS4 Pro, and yes, the Xbox One as well. Fortunately, the PC version is not impacted by this issue at all. Speaking of Xbox, with the latest version of the game installed on Microsoft's console, performance remains similar to the launch version, without any frame pacing issues or other similar problems. That's not to say it's perfect, you still run into frame rate drops when you press your camera up against transparent objects such as glass or grass. But aside from that, on average you can expect a generally very stable experience here on the Xbox, and it's a pleasure to play. The controller input also remains responsive here just as it was at launch. In comparison, the PS4 version is now comparable in terms of responsiveness since the 1.02 patch, which is where the performance issues cropped up, but in addition, some folks are still encountering controller drift issues, which occurs with some controllers when the dead zone is too small. I didn't have any problems with this with the controllers here, but there are plenty of reports out there suggesting that it's not completely fixed. Of the two versions then, clearly the Xbox One version has fewer problems overall. It does run at a lower resolution, sure, but it's a more fluid and reliable experience than the stuttering PS4 version. What makes this tricky to call though is that things could very well change again with the next patch, since the game is still clearly being adjusted on Sony's machine. Time will tell. Unfortunately, across both consoles, loading times remain extremely lengthy, with jumps between areas still coming in around 1 minute on average.
Phew!
Which is why the best way to play Prey remains the PC version. This is where I opted to do my full playthrough, and it has been an absolute treat with blazing fast performance, quick loading, and responsive controls. It's simply a cut above the console versions and makes for a more enjoyable experience overall. And that's ultimately where we're at right now. You got the PC version on top, Xbox One right in the middle, and PlayStation 4 falling behind due to bad frame pacing and screen tearing issues. It is awesome that Arcane did at last add proper PS4 Pro support to this version, but the performance in this current state just isn't good enough. If Arcane can find a way to introduce responsive controls without compromising fluidity, then it will become the better of the two console releases, but that's a big if. But that's all for now then. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter. And until next time, this is John signing off.